Hey, it's your buddy Bob. Rock and roll travelogue. Here we go again. We got done in Boston, and now we're headed out to western Massachusetts into the Berkshires, which are a part of the Appalachian Mountains. We're going to be at about 3,500 feet, going to end up the day at one of the great boomer generation monuments before we call it a day. So let's get started. We're heading for Little Washington, Massachusetts, in the western part of the state. This is where Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performer James Taylor has his recording studio called The Barn. Now, James still records and tours today, and one of his annual shows is at nearby Tanglewood in Lenox, Massachusetts. This venue is much like Wolf Trap in Northern Virginia or Blossom Music Center in Cleveland. And a variety of big acts play these venues every year. Early in the morning on a weekend is when I was here. I could not get into the grounds, but this place is absolutely beautiful, isn't it? It's the summer home of the Boston Symphony. Now, James Taylor's current wife, Caroline, or Kim Smedvig, was formerly the director of marketing for the Boston Symphony, and this may have a little bit to do with the location of the Taylors' current residence in Lenox, Mass. Now, the town of Stockbridge borders Tanglewood, and Stockbridge has the Norman Rockwell Museum, paintings of the bucolic region. James Taylor wrote the song Sweet Baby James early in his career. It was a big hit, and he referenced Stockbridge, the lyrics. Now, the 1st of December was covered with snow, so was the turnpike from Stockbridge to Boston. The Berkshires seemed dreamlike on account of that frosting, with 10 miles behind me and 10,000 more to go. Sweet Baby James. Well, one added note, James Taylor, not too long ago, headlined with Taylor Swift. And isn't it interesting that Taylor Swift was named after him? Well, time to get to the campus of Bard College. It's at Annandale-on-Hudson in upstate New York. Now, two students met here at the once Red Balloon Cafe on campus. These students were Donald Fagan and Walter Becker, and they became Steely Dan. Now, the cafe is no longer, but my contact there told me that the cafe was right here in the middle of what is today the maintenance buildings. Well, the albums Can't Buy a Thrill and Pretzel Logic produced such hits as Do It Again, Reelin' in the Years, and Ricky Don't Lose That Number. Steely Dan are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, our next stop is at West Saugerties, New York. This is the home of the Big Pink, and this house is near Woodstock, New York. It's where Bob Dylan and the musicians who would later become The Band recorded. Now, these musicians had backed Dylan on an earlier tour and were known then as the Hawks. To get to Big Pink, I had to take a very narrow country road to Parnassus Lane and then a very narrow and muddy road to get to the Big Pink. The song The Wait became a staple of the band, and was released on their first album called Music from Big Pink. The opening lyric line of the song is, I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half dead. Well, the writer, Robbie Robertson of the band, had a guitar made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and this set the stage for him to write the song in 1968. Later on, we did stop to take a picture of Welcome to Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Woodstock, New York is nearby. Bob Dylan was a major player there. This is 59 Tinker Street. Now, Tinker's the main street through town. Dylan lived here in the mid-'60s. This is the Cafe Espresso, where he wrote Mr. Tambourine Man, It Ain't Me, Babe, Subterranean Homesick Blues. This is according to the Center for Photography, or Woodstock, CPW. Well, Dylan spent some time in Woodstock with his girlfriend, Susie Rotolo, with whom he is pictured on the famous album cover of the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. That was taken in Lower Manhattan in Greenwich Village. Later on, though, mid-'60s, Dylan married Sarah, who was a former model. He had 5 children with her. Sarah was friends with the wife of Dylan's manager, Albert Grossman. In 1966, upon leaving Grossman's house in Woodstock, Dylan would be involved in a serious motorcycle accident not far from that home. Well, here are a few more pictures of the town of Woodstock. And speaking of Albert Grossman, the manager for not only Dylan, but also the band and many others, he was a major figure in Woodstock. He originally met Dylan in Greenwich Village in New York, where he managed the folk and pop group Peter, Paul, and Mary, who later had their biggest hit with Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind. That was in 1963. Grossman set up a recording studio in Woodstock called Utopia, and later a record label, Bearsville, named after a hamlet inside Woodstock. One of the early successes at the studio was a band called Runt, which was fronted by Todd Rundgren. His song, We Gotta Get You a Woman, was a commercial success in 1970. In time, Rundgren would be brought to Woodstock by Grossman to produce an album for the band, who, as I mentioned a moment ago, was managed by Grossman. Meatloaf recorded his highly successful Bat Out of Hell here, and that was produced by Rundgren, by the way. In the 90s, the Dave Matthews Band recorded their first two albums in Woodstock. By the mid-'70s, Todd Rundgren got tired of being a studio rat, and he moved to nearby Lake Hill, New York, where he built a studio, and he bought a house in Lake Hill on Mink Hollow Road. And the house later burned down, so we couldn't find it. Here's a picture along Mink Hollow where Todd Rundgren lived and wrote many, many songs and produced, of course. He then recorded an album here called The Hermit of Mink Hollow, which contained the popular Can We Still Be Friends, which came out on the, interestingly, Bearsville record label. The song is assumed to be about his ex-girlfriend, Bebe Buell, who was a former Playboy playmate. Buell gave birth to a daughter in 1977, named her Liv. Young Liv was the daughter of Steve Tyler of Aerosmith, with whom Buell had a brief affair. However, Todd Rundgren signed the birth certificate as her father. Well, on to the great baby boomer monument, Woodstock. Not in Woodstock, New York, but 90 miles south in Bethel, New York. Now, as you enter the grounds, you encounter the museum at Bethel Woods. I suggest you go inside and learn all about the Woodstock Festival and the culture of the 1960s. Fascinating. Here's the sign indicating the Woodstock Festival site is on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, let's take a moment to look at the next two photos describing the scene in August of 1969. This tells you a little bit about what you were seeing as you looked down the hill where the festival was held. At the bottom of the hill where the festival was held, there is more to see. Now, the event was held from August 15th to 18th. It was the farm of Max Yasgur, and it's memorialized in a hit song by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Here's a list of some or most of the onstage performers, from Richie Havens and Arlo Guthrie, to John Sebastian, to The Who, and Canned Heat, and the Grateful Dead, and Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and very famously, these guys, Country Joe McDonald and the Fish. These guys with their anti-Vietnam War protest song called The Fish Cheer, I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag. Remember the lyrics? 1, 2, 3, 4, what are we fighting for? Anti-Vietnam War song. Well, the importance of Woodstock cannot be underestimated for its cultural significance in the late 60s and beyond. The festival was held just a month after the landing on the moon by 3 U.S. astronauts, Apollo 11, led by Neil Armstrong. The Woodstock event defined a generation for sure. Well, let's recap today and the artists we covered who are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All right, James Taylor, Steely Dan, the band, Todd Rundgren, and Bob Dylan. Well, gotta bounce. See you next time on Rock and Roll Travelogue. I'm Buddy Bob, saying until next time, good heart and stout luck.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.